The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Yes, coming to you cordless with a little dollop of fiber optics. It's Tuesday night, May 21st, 2024. It's 11 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 8 p.m. on the West Coast, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Sydney, Australia, and 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time here where I'm sitting in our studios in Northeast Minneapolis. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 121. If you're keeping score at home, I don't know why you'd be doing that, but if you are, there you go. Now, you've been watching the show the last few nights, the last couple weeks. You know I'm having surgery a week from Monday. I have to tell you, today I actually feel pretty good because master the obvious. I finally figured this out. I'm having hip replacement surgery. Do you want no pain? Don't walk. And that works amazingly well. Yeah, I'm basically only walking from my car into the studio and back home. That's it. That's all the walking I'm doing. Otherwise, I'm at home. I pretty much figured out how to do most of my show prep on the phone. That's been for quite a while now on my smartphone. But yeah, so I'm actually doing okay. I actually feel good. Now that said, we're taking tomorrow night off, but and which as partly for medical reasons because I don't. It's not so much that I have to go to the doctor. I have a whole bunch of administrative crap I have to fill out for these surgeries. So, at any rate, yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Our guest tonight, Ed Morrissey, the managing editor of HotAir.com. He's on. We have a great conversation. We taped this afternoon. I'm actually thinking, now, I've told you this. We offer all our guests the opportunity to either go live, it's around 11:30 Eastern, or we can pre-tape in the afternoon anytime. It's anytime after 2 o'clock Eastern time. I'm totally flexible with that anytime afterwards. I'm starting to think that maybe we should cut out the live interviews. The reasons are technical because a lot of time people come on. I mean, I can't remember the last person who came on was a Robert Powell. He had trouble with his camera, and it's live, and I don't want to put people through that crap. And the other thing is, people don't call in during the interviews, and I'm starting to think I don't want them to because I like talking to people, and pretty much that's my strong suit, and it busts my concentration. So I don't even know if I want callers or texts during the interview. Texts aren't actually that bad, but and the thing is not that callers are bad. It's just like I said, it breaks my concentration. It's kind of like I was a DJ years ago, and so the cool thing about DJing is, and you got to think about this, you're basically taking a whole bunch of records depends on what you got going, maybe 100 of them, and you're creating a nonstop 4-hour composition. That's basically what you're doing. You're composing in real time. And it's kind of the same way with the interviews. I don't know if I want people busted in, But anyway, so my point is, yeah, I'm going to think about that. I don't know when I'll make a decision or if there's a decision to be made. But Ed is on. We pre-taped Ed this afternoon, so we're going to play that later on. So he's our guest tonight. We're off tomorrow night, Thursday night. Economist extraordinaire Murray Sabrin, professor emeritus at Ramapo College in New Jersey. He's joining us because my friend Tim Conaway wrote me a few days ago and said when the stock market hit 40,000, he said, well, the underlying numbers on the economy do not look good. And he ended his email with, I wonder what Murray Sabrin thinks about this. And I thought, yeah, let's find out. I called Murray. So, and besides, I mean, I have not been doing that well the last couple weeks. I've been falling off. I'm booking guests. Not that Murray is a B-level guest. I mean, he's basically we've always pulled Murray out for momentous occasions here. He was the very first guest on the show ever. He was a guest on our 100th show by design. Him and I go way, way back. So and I love listening to him, and you guys need economic education. You do. So he's coming on Thursday. Monday we're taking off because it's Memorial Day. Tuesday we have our month in review panel. That's Larry Newman, Don Zorro, Tim Conaway. They're joining us on Tuesday next week, a week from tonight. We're taking next Wednesday off too, and then Thursday, I'm almost certain we have a guest book, but I don't want to announce it yet. I have this stuff up on our website on the front page. The schedule as usual. It says mystery guest. It's a mystery. I'm almost certain we have somebody, but I do not want to mention it until we actually confirm it. So that's next week, and then the week after that, we're taking the whole week off because I'm having surgery on Monday. We're coming back on June 10th. So, and this is probably, I mean, normally I probably would have taken a hiatus in late July, early August, but because of this now, that's screwed. We're gonna go all the way through. So, summer anyway. So yeah, now you guys can call in tonight. First part's live. This is live. I'm talking to you live right now. Now you don't know this if you're on Rumble and you're watching the playback. It's not live, but if you're not watching the playback and you're watching it live, it's live. I'm talking to you. I'm in my studio here in Northeast Minneapolis, and I'm talking directly to you. Goes up to the satellite, comes down, just all a bunch of packets. They're rearranged and then they're put back together. It's like freaking magic. What the hell? Who are we kidding? It's amazing this works. Amazing. And the thing is, once you understand actually how it works technically, it's even more amazing. What the hell? So you disassemble all the file and then you put it back together on the other end. Oh yeah, and it all happens like in one thousandth of a second. Sure. Yeah. Tell me about it. Anyway, so we're live first half. The second the interview's recorded live in the last half. That's part 3. I'm thinking about adding to our blog. I think I'm going to add a part 3 blog just for all the weird shit we talk about here all the time. I mean, that's where all the weird stuff goes, part 3. And also, that's where I'd encourage you to call in. So you want to call in. There's 3 ways you can do it. You can do this right here, jimandknight.com/call. That you can call in with your webcam. I put your picture on the screen. We talk. This is supposedly not my determination. Talkers Magazine, the Bible of talk media in the United States, says this is the very first talk show in America that takes video phone calls, live video phone calls. So we got that. You can call in with your camera, or not with your phone, 563-999-3435. That, of course, is audio only. And then I talk to you, we yak. We've had some problems. Blog Talk Radio provides their telephone number, but they are working tonight. It's working. So we're broadcasting live there, and then that will be turned into a podcast. Now, I have to apologize to you folks. If you've subscribed to our RSS podcast audio feed, there's about 6 shows missing from the last month. I think maybe even 7. I'm not sure because Blog Talk Radio went kaput. Now, I tried uploading audio files to those episodes, but believe it, I found out later. I uploaded all of them, and then I found out they didn't take because apparently because we didn't ever broadcasted anything at all, we can't actually change the file because there's no file to change. So I'm going to take care of that the week I'm off. So they've told me that within 48 hours of the surgery, I should be fine, but we'll see. So anyway, so we got that, and then we got this right here. You can text it in real time. I got a monitor off to the side here. I see the text 408-458-5088. You can also, and very few people do this, you can call that number and leave a voicemail message for 30 seconds. And I do listen to them all. Like I said, it doesn't happen very often. But if you're interested enough, I'll actually put your audio on the air. But it's mostly for text. That's what most people use it for. And you can do that. Now, if you're, and this we explain this on our website, if you're on one of the various platforms, Rumble, Trovo, Twitch, blah blah blah, you were still on YouTube. Who knows when how the hell that's going to last? We're not on Facebook anymore. Facebook banned us. The, you don't even want to know. You don't even want to know. Don't even get me started. But apparently, we practice some misinformation apparently, so they banned us. Yeah, so we're off of there. But if you're on any of the other platforms, they all I think if I'm right, all of them except for maybe Twitter, you can leave a comment, but it's not an actual chat. It's not in real time. They have chat screens next to our video, but I don't see those. I know that's very common for people to do who do what I do to read those. I'm not going to read them while I'm on there because I think it's stupid. I see people doing this. I think it's dumb. You want to shout out? I don't know. Call your friend. Like it's a show, man. So I'm not going to spend my time reading and while you're watching. I think it's like I was talking to a friend of mine today. He was talking about eating on television. It looks really really bad. There's just something about people chewing on TV that just doesn't make it. We're not going there. Because he suggested that okay, I'm kind of a fan of Hostess Twinkies, much to the chagrin of my wife, who thinks that that's not even food. But yeah, okay, I buy them by the box. I do. They're individually wrapped. I have maybe 5 a week. Okay, right? I got a heart condition. I gotta take a bunch of pills. I don't like to take pills on an empty stomach, man. So you gotta, 120 calories, one Twinkie gets the job done. Okay, so he suggested I should eat Twinkies on the air. No, not gonna happen. All right, so you can call me up. Yeah, you can do that. All right, and we have a sponsor. Here's our sponsor right here. It's Conk News at conk.com. This is a news aggregator. It's the best news aggregator on the internet. I'm not kidding about this. I mean, you might think, "Oh, Jim, they're paying you." Well, it doesn't matter. I would say this anyway. I mean, it's like this is the best news aggregator on the internet. Period. Now we got a couple interesting things going here. I load this about half an hour before we go live. This is the Conk front page in real time. In other words, if you go to conk.com right now, you'll see the exact same thing. That said, though, this updates every 3 hours. So auto will automatically turn over. And I don't understand. I don't know the exact schedule of the servers, but it regularly turns over while I'm waiting to put it on the air. So because I can see it in a little preview screen. And it will flip over. Now they got a couple interesting things here. If you look at the second headline in the main column, that's 100% fed up. They're reporting that Nikki Haley is planning on mounting a challenge to Donald Trump at the Republican convention. That's just what they're reporting now. Don't know how much truth there is to that. I don't know. Conk uses 75 different news sources. Every 3 hours, the servers go out and get all the new stories and all those 75 sources, bring them back, lay them out on the front page in chronological order, regardless of what the source is. Like, for example, if you'll note, I can tell because in the middle column, there's a little logo at the bottom left of every story. That's the logo of the website, the news service it comes from. So that means there are 2 stories here from 100% fed up in a row. But that's just chance. That's because they posted them really close together. That's the only reason. So it's taken all these stories are posted chronologically, regardless of the source, in the chronological order that they're of their newness. Did that make any sense? I think so. And then for your enjoyment, the pictures are from the stories themselves, the photos. The headlines are not rewritten. You click through a headline, you go directly to that article. No interstitial page, no ad page, no home page. You go directly to the article. It's the closest thing to an online newspaper you'll find anywhere. And so I heartily recommend this. I used to work for these people. I'm very proud to do it, and I'm very proud of the product. So good kudos to them. And you can't do better than this. If you're a news junkie, I've said this is a sexual experience. You can access this at conk.com, conk.com. Not only do you not need to register, it's free. You just go to the URL, go to Kong.com, and there it is. So at any rate, you should enjoy that, and I hope you do. All right, I got a couple things here before we talk to Ed. First of all, I had another breaking. And I hate to use this term. I have a breaking news story, but I hate it because on the banners and on goddamn the news services, and it bothers me. Even Fox News, which is by far and away just in production value at all, way better than any of the other cable news channels. I mean, not even close. They do this, and they should stop. MSNBC, that's the Toyland, and CNN is Dinky Town. And okay, so I understand why they're doing it because they're stupid, but the people at Fox do not seem to be stupid, and they do this too, and it really bothers me. That is, they put the freaking breaking news banner up, but here it is, and you probably haven't heard this because this is about maybe 3 hours old, and that is Klaus Schwab is going to step down as the executive director of the World Economic Forum. Now, I didn't know this. He started this thing like 50 years ago. It was originally called, I wrote this down, the European Management Symposium. That's the original term for it. And they renamed it to the World Economic Forum, where basically gets to play president of Earth. Which I think Stacey Abrams played that on a Star Trek movie, but in real life, it's Klaus Schwab. So he is stepping down from this role. He's moving, and he's going to be the chairman of the board of trustees, but he's not going to be the executive chairman of the whole thing anymore. And according to their charter, he gets to personally pick his successor. He's not done that yet. I can't remember. Is a guy named Brexler that is highly people say it's probably going to be him because he was handpicked by Schwab to be the president, basically the number 2 person. So people think, but whatever. He hasn't done it yet, but he's stepping down from the World Economic Forum. This is and also he started this thing with $6,000. Last year, it made in 1 year $500 million. So he's done very well for himself. And now, of course, because he wants to run the world, he doesn't want us to do well for himself because we should own nothing and like it. That's their theory. It's just freaking unbelievable. I mean, I just like, but shit, it's like you'll hear Ed and I talk about this in the interview today. There's 2 different ways in America to make money right now. 2 basic ways. One is you either you work for the man or you start your own business. I'm lumping all that together. Anyway, one is from positive production. The other is from grifting off the government, or in this case, governments, plural. You can make an enormous amount of money. Just for example, we were talking about what's this woman's name, Hannah Jones, the woman who came up with the 1619 project from worked for the New York Times. I don't think she actually works for the Times anymore. I'm not sure, but and this woman has been showered with awards and also contracts. I mean, she's a multimillionaire now. Or for example, the people who ran Black Lives Matter, who ran off with I think it was $50 million, and no one's ever been able to trace it. Matter of fact, no one's ever been able to trace them. The 3 founders of Black Lives Matter apparently are not involved in the organization anymore, but they've all bought huge mansions. It's that's it. You either do positive work or you grift off the public. Those are the 2 major ways in America to make money right now. It's disgusting, and then people wonder why the term now is normies. That would be normal people. Why we're so upset with this. And meanwhile, Biden's numbers continue to go down. They've gone down, and now his approval rating went down another couple points this week too. I mean, people are sick of this. They're sick of this crap. And you got a president who basically he will say, or it's really amazing. Literally tonight, Joy Reid gets on MSNBC and compares Trump to Nazis, and Jen Psaki says, she's not sure there's going to be debates because Trump's a liar and he's probably just lying. And yet, in the meantime, their president will say or do, especially say, anything necessary or possible to get him reelected. It's completely self-serving. He does not care about anybody, anything, or the consequences of his words or his actions. He doesn't. I mean, look at all the he screwed up this thing with Israel and Hamas. I mean, they can't decide what they're supporting. In the meantime, they're keeping weapons from Israel, which were mandated by Congress, and Israel might need them for their survival. Does that matter? Or the fact that there's still 100 hostages and 6 Americans being held by Hamas. Oh, not that's not what are you gonna do something? No, no, can't do anything about that. I need votes. The people in Dearborn, Michigan, those Muslims need to vote for me. So we're not going to do anything about that. I mean, the fecklessness is just mind boggling. And here's the thing, I think this is the problem with Joe. This has worked for him for 40 years because it's standard political bullshit behavior. Now, let me give you an example of this. A friend of mine we were talking about Ted Cruz, Republican friend of mine. He said, "You'd love to have Cruz on your show, wouldn't you?" I said, "No, I wouldn't book Cruz on my show." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I don't book any sitting politicians on my show because all they do is lie." And I'm not talking about Democrats or Republicans. I'm talking about all of them. All sitting politicians will only say shit to get them reelected. That's all they do. And he kind of didn't believe me. I make an exception for Trump, and this is really weird. I might even make an exception for Bernie Sanders because I think Sanders is crazy, downright crazy. And this is another thing Ed and I are going to talk about in a few minutes here about the fact that there's no such thing as democratic socialism. There's socialism, and it doesn't work. And it's been proven now over the last 100 years. It's proven over and over and over again. It does not work. And this is my problem with the left right now. Bill Maher was on Greg Gutfeld last night, and he's talking about the fact that he said, Democrats, liberals used to be known for solutions. Now, I could quibble with that, but okay, let's buy that. But they certainly the hell aren't anymore. And that's what he was getting at. They aren't. There's nothing involved in positive solutions here. These are people who think that because they came up with an idea, therefore it will work. And it is a character flaw, but for some reason, I don't know if it's the narcissistic age we live in or something, it's been amplified, and there's more and more people that think that like this. I have an idea, therefore it will work because I thought of it. No, it won't. No, socialism is not going to work. You can cut it every 8 days till Sunday. It's never going to work ever. It isn't. So I'm getting back to like Joe Biden here. This modus operandi for politicians has worked for 100 years, and all of a sudden people are tired of it. It's like people can see through this. Although I was really, really disappointed that Fannie Willis or Fawny or whatever the hell her name is in Georgia, she won her primary for re-election. Now she's going to go up against a GOP candidate, but wasn't the real election. A Democrat wins that seat. But I would think that, for example, here in Minnesota, the very district I'm sitting in, Elon Omar's, there's like 4. She's going to have 4 challengers for a primary election, and last time one guy almost beat her. Not he came up just a little bit short. Guy's name is Don Samuels, and he's running again. Then there's a woman who's running against her, who's from the Middle East, if I'm right, also like her. And I mean, she's a joke, but and I said this before. In this district in Minneapolis, this is one of the maybe 3 most liberal congressional districts in America. A Republican doesn't have a chance in hell. So you're talking about different flavors of Democrats. But my God, can't we get a Democrat that isn't nuts, that isn't really seriously psychologically disturbed? I mean, that's all I'm asking for. Yeah, I'm not going to agree with your policies, but at least you're sane. This woman is not sane. She isn't. Oh man. Okay, so yeah, there. I'm on my soapbox. and I'm, I'm going to dive off into the dust. Oh, and I want to talk. Well, there's one other thing I want to mention here before we do the interview, and something I talked about last night. I was talking about the fact that there's I w- the, well, this started because I mentioned that we've had 30 presidents since the end of the Civil War, just 1865. Since Lincoln died, we've had 30 presidents, and I'm absolutely convinced, based on history, that what I know of history, that Joe Biden will go down as the absolute, without, it won't even be close. He will be the worst of the 30 of them. And then you've got guys like Warren Harding, Herbert Hoover, Jimmy Carter. There's a couple other you can name that did not do a good job. That I don't know. Well, I don't know if you call them outright failures. Hell, I'd even put George W. Bush in that thing. I know. Don't I told you this is. I may be a conservative, but I'm not a Republican. I do not think George W. Bush was a good president. I just don't. But okay, so you got that. But the reason I brought that up is because last night I was talking about the fact that Jimmy Carter had probably the most perfect resume to be president that anybody who's ever done the job ever. He was governor of a state, Georgia, very successfully. He was very successful governor. He was a very, very well-renowned small business owner. As I mentioned last night, if I'm correct, Carter Farms is still the predominant producer of peanuts in the United States. I mean, he started a small business and it grew. It's not a huge business. It's not Fortune 500, that sort of thing. It's not a public company, but it's a very large small business. That's the right way to put it. He was a nuclear physicist in the Navy. Did you hear that? He was a nuclear physicist. Sam Donaldson, who worked for ABC during his tenure, said that he was not only was he the smartest president he ever worked under or for or reported on, he was one of the smartest people Donaldson said he ever met. Yeah, so you got all that. You got this stellar resume, and you also a guy's by most standards, pretty reasonable, decent man too, a good guy, right? Well, his presidency went terrible. I mean, it just did. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you that it was successful. It wasn't. Now, that said, the difference between him and Joe Biden, which I've talked about at length, but the difference is Carter acknowledged at the time that things weren't going well. I mean, he acknowledged in his public speeches, in his television broadcasts to the public. He was constantly asking people, "What can we do to get this on track?" He openly acknowledged the fact things were not going well, as opposed to Biden, who completely ignores it, totally ignores it. We got this thing. I mean, he's done this like 3 times in the last week. That when he took office, inflation was at 9%. No, it wasn't. It was at 1.4% when he took office. It was not at 9%. He caused it to go to 9%. And that's the other thing too. You could say that Carter's problems were basically he was handed them. It was basically kind of bad luck. I mean, he did not cause a lot of that stuff, and he also did some positive things. He did almost virtually everything that Joe Biden's been suffering of and from is of his own doing. First of all, there's just the budget, just the inflation. He did the $1.4 trillion whatever American Rescue Plan by 2021 was simply not necessary. The government was already coming, or the economy was already coming back. They basically did that as a ruse to get this bunch of crap through the Congress. That's basically why they did it. And it had really nothing to do with the pandemic per se. But that said, they created a lot of money that was not backed up by anything, and that causes inflation. And I mean, everybody was telling them this was going to happen. I was telling them. I'm a guy sitting in my underwear in Minneapolis, and I was saying this. Everyone with a brain was telling them you're going to get inflation from this, and then it happens, and they're shocked. You know, I don't I Joe Biden as a person, I have a very hard time pegging him because I don't know if he's unbelievably stupid or just disillusioned. I don't know. I can't tell if that if he really literally has blinders on and cannot see anything outside of his own self interest, or if he's just unbelievably dumb. I can't tell. But now there's a reason I brought all this up over again. I was thinking about this, and that is if you go look through presidential history, there's a distinct difference between presidential intelligence and presidential talent. Those are two completely separate things. As a matter of fact, I hate to draw a generalization because I might be wrong here. Basically, it seems like they never align. Take case in point, Barack Obama. You're not gonna find a single person who says Barack Obama's stupid. The man's very, very bright, has no talent, doesn't have any talent at all. I mean, he can bitch and moan about the fact he couldn't work with Congress, all this sort of stuff. Bill Clinton did it. Matter of fact, that's a good example because there's an example of somebody who actually was both really intelligent and highly talented. He was a Rhodes Scholar. I mean, no one's going to call Clinton stupid either, but that he's like almost the exception. There's very few people. Another exception, or no, this is not an exception. I don't think Ronald Reagan, a very talented man, maybe not the brightest bulb in the on the store shelf, maybe not. You know, um, I don't want to put the guy down because he accomplished a lot of really good things. But in terms of like intellectual capacity, you probably would never put him at the first on the top row of anything. You probably wouldn't. Now, I remember the entire time he was president, I had doubts about his intelligence. He was obvious he was doing a good job, so that was fine. But I had doubts about his absolute intelligence. After he left office, Nancy Reagan, and I don't think it was I think it was that was before he passed away. She insisted that they release his book of letters. I mean, the guy wrote letters constantly, and there was a really interesting thing about him. And this is I'm not really exaggerating this. He like never lost track of any single person he ever knew in his entire life. He stayed in touch with everybody. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And you got a guy, he's president. He knows a lot of people, but he's constantly writing letters. He was writing letters constantly to everybody, even when he was in office. And if you read that book, and I did, it's hard to read that book and not realize. Well, I don't know if I would say he was intelligent, but he was very, very wise. So it's like you want to parse that. If those are two different things, I don't know. He was obviously a very wise man, and so in that sense, um, okay, you give the intelligence to him, I guess. If you want to, if I don't know if those things are the same or different. That's a whole 1 hour discussion we could have. But this is my point is that those things do not necessarily go together. Talent and intelligence are not, and I think Barack Obama is a really example of that. Very, very intelligent man who actually had no talent to get anything accomplished. He couldn't get anything done. He uh, Michael Moore said this, famous liberal. The only thing Barack Obama will be known for is being the first black president. That's it. Otherwise, he's just going to be another line in history. You know, in the list of presidents, he's probably come in somewhere around the middle. You know, uh, neither good nor bad. So, at any rate, I just wanted you to point that out, and that's actually true. I want to point it out because it's kind of true of life too. There's a huge difference between intelligence and talent. There is. You don't have to be intelligent to have a lot of talent, and vice versa. You know. So I remember talking to a friend of mine, guy. He's a CFO of a major corporation, and we were talking about this. And I said to him, I said, I think I've noticed this is several years ago. I think I've noticed that there's a lot of people who are really successful in business who actually aren't that smart. And he said, "Oh, yeah, you just noticed that, huh?" Yeah, and he said that. He was talking about that too, that, that talent and intelligence do not go together. They aren't necessarily one and the same. There's a lot of people in business who have the talent to get a lot of things done, and especially on that level where you're talking about major corporations, or in this case, the federal government, it's like turning around the biggest freaking ship on the planet. I mean, some people, like, for example, Ron DeSantis seems to have a talent for this. And there's a good example too. I don't know if I'd say DeSantis is the smartest blade in the bunch either. I don't know if I'd say that, but he's definitely got a talent for getting the government to do what he wants it to do. So And the same thing in business. I mean, large corporations, some people can manipulate that system, and most people can't. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I just thought that was kind of interesting. We're going to go to our interview now. Ed Morrissey, managing director of HotAir.com. Here's 12 seconds of bumper music, and then you'll see Ed. Joining us from his office in Central Texas, the managing editor of HotAir.com, Ed Morrissey. Hi, Matt. Hi, Ed.
How are you doing today, sir?
On a scale of 1 to 2, I'm pushing 2. How about you?
1.75. 1.75.
Oh, man. You're doing better than that. I know you. Okay, so I got a whole bunch of stuff here. First thing, you wrote, I have not talked about this much on the show because, frankly, up to this point, a lot of this has just bored me. But it looks like the Trump trial is rolling to an end, and you wrote about it today. And here's the thing I can't get around it. It's at the point where the judge is not even trying to conceal his bias and what's going on here. Is that what you gather from this?
Yeah, and I have another article coming up later today too. Talks a little bit more about this. But I mean, if you watch Jonathan Turley and if you watch Alan Dershowitz was in the courtroom on Monday, right, when all
Yeah.
this was taking place with Robert Costello, and he was astounded. He said he saw more reversible error in one day in that courtroom than he's seen in his entire legal career. And Alan Dershowitz has been a lawyer literally longer than Juan Merchan has been alive, the judge in this case. And Alan Dershowitz is a little prone to hyperbole, of course. So
Yeah.
you take that with a grain of salt. But
And
yeah, I think
also,
Jonathan Turley said the
politically,
same thing.
he's still more or less a liberal too. There's that also,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but he did work with Donald Trump in the
Right.
defending him in the impeachment. But Jonathan Turley hasn't done any of that, and Jonathan Turley saw the same stuff too. I mean, Eli Honig over at CNN. I mean, all these commentators are aghast at how this trial has been conducted, both by the prosecution and by the judge. And yeah, I mean, it's just a strange. It's almost a parody of how trials should be conducted in this country.
Yeah. So, do you have a prediction on the outcome? I have one. Go ahead.
My prediction is a hung jury
That's mine
because
too.
I
Right.
don't think they'll get I don't think that they'll get an acquittal, but I don't think they're going to get 12 people to sign on to this. There's two attorneys, by the way, on this jury.
Yeah.
Now they're Manhattan attorneys, obviously, because this is in Manhattan, but those attorneys are going to understand how manipulative this has been, and I'm curious to see how they're going to go along with this. But yeah, I think hung jury is how this thing's going to end up.
That's what I think too. All right, let's move on. The International Criminal Court basically told Israel they can go stuff it, and I just find this I find this unbelievable. Now I have to preface this. I've talked about this quite a lot on my show. The last time you came on at the end of your interview appearance, you made a very, very eloquent reason for why we should support Ukraine, which I've told you I've been on the fence about the entire time. Actually, still am, but you did a really good job in moving me toward that direction. You really did. I mean, seriously, it was the best argument I've heard ever from anybody. I mean, I credit you for that, but I do not have the same ambivalence about Israel and Hamas at all. I mean, this is just, to me, the fact I don't see how you can be for Hamas. I just don't. But here, the International Criminal Court has basically said both Hamas and Israel are guilty here, and I can't wrap my mind around this for bullshit. And then the question is first of all, are they corrupt? And secondly, are we getting to the point where like everything's corrupt? I mean, what's going on here?
Well, I'd say certainly multilateral organizations like the ICC, which, by the way, neither the U.S. nor Israel belong to, so technically are outside of the jurisdiction anyway.
Right.
Those are and this is correct. This is entirely political. This is the world elite that wants to somehow make a moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas. The indictment itself, or the request for an indictment itself, or arrest warrants, not indictment. The request for arrest warrants talk about the state of Palestine and the territory of Israel, which is legally reversed. Israel is a state. It's recognized as a state. It's been recognized as
Right.
a state since 1948 by the United Nations. So it's not a territory. It is a state. Gaza is a territory. There isn't a territory of Palestine. There's Gaza and the West Bank. West Bank is occupied territory. Gaza is not occupied territory. At least it wasn't until this war started.
Hold on, I gotta
I
stop
mean,
you. Am I right
yeah,
about this, about the fact that historians have pointed out there has never been a state of Palestine ever?
never,
Right.
never. There's never been a state of Palestine. Never. There was a period in time in which the Romans called it Syria Palestina after they 135 AD, excuse me, 135 AD destruction of Jerusalem and the expulsion of the Judeans, the Jews, from Jerusalem. They renamed the whole territory Syria Palestina, which is where Palestine comes from now. But there was never a country of Palestine. The area was invaded by Arabs after the foundation of Islam. It was then invaded by Turks. Sometime in the 12th century, 13th century. The Ottoman Empire controlled it until the British and French seized it. And the British ended up in control of it. There's never been, and the British called it Palestine, but it wasn't a state. That was their term for the region, which included what was then known as the Transjordan, which we now call the country of Jordan, the state of Jordan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so no, I mean, it's absurd. There's never been a state of Palestine. Never.
I'm very familiar with all that conquering BS. I'm half Albanian. If you know the history of Albania, it's the same thing. I mean,
Yeah.
people run it
Yeah.
in and out entirely, completely. Where did we get, excuse me, where did we get to the point where so many Americans hate Jews? What the hell happened with that?
Did we? I mean, let's face it. Just like everywhere else, this country has had some issues with how it's handled the Jews. Now, for the past several decades, we've been a lot better at it than we were in the decades prior to that. But how did we get to the point we're at right now? Academia. Academia has been teaching this oppressor-oppressed paradigm. It's a neo-Marxist paradigm in which rather than using bourgeoisie and proletariat, they're using oppressor-oppressed, and uh, they use that model in the same way that Western civilization is an occupier, and they occupy areas that are populated by non-white people, brown people, as they sometimes call them. And in Israel, where the Judeans have been since time immemorial, by the way, the Jews never actually left that area. They've been Jews there the whole time for 3,500 years or so. The Jews somehow became white because the Arabs were brown,
Yeah.
and that's it. That's the reason why. And so, whenever you're doing it, I mean, this is almost, you can go back 100 years, you can go back 500 years on this. Whenever you start creating ideologies where ethnic origin becomes determinist, right? That's when you get the Nazis, that's when you get the KKK, that's when you get all these things. Once you've reached that point, the Jews are always the first to go under the bus. Always, every single time.
Any reason why? I mean, it's just historical.
Because yeah, just historically speaking, they've always been the scapegoats. The Jews have always been the scapegoats. It doesn't matter where, when, or how. It's one of the reasons why they argued after World War II that they really needed to have their own state.
Right.
They need to be able to protect themselves.
Let me throw out a theory here. I have the feeling that a lot of people hate Jewish people the same way people hate gay people, and I think it's envy. Do you think there's any? I mean, they have an extremely functional society. Look at Tel Aviv. They built in 75, hell, in 50 years, they built one of the great cities in the world, literally in a dusty bowl. You know, these people are very, very pragmatic and they're very productive. And I think some of it's just plain envy.
Well, I think it's always to some extent envy, right? There's envy that always plays a part of this, and it's probably very true in terms of Israel because Israel has transformed that area into an agricultural, you know, uh, agricultural powerhouse.
Yeah.
They are self-sufficient. That hadn't been the case there for thousands of years.
No, and especially you consider that what that real estate is. I mean, seriously, it's fucking dust. I mean, basically, and
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so they're the ones that actually reclaimed all that land in every single way that you can think of it, except occupation, because it wasn't an occupation. They've always been there. They bought the land that they were on there from people who owned it previously. I mean, they have legal documents showing that they bought the land. They've been there forever. Half of the Jews in Israel are Mizrahi Jews, which means they came from either there or other parts of the Middle East. So not even the idea that they're somehow white is absurd. Half of them
Yeah,
are Middle Eastern in origin.
right.
Yeah.
So uh, I've this was in the news yesterday and the day before, and I'm so cynical. At first, I didn't buy it until Amal Clooney actually came out and confirmed this. That she said she had something to do with getting the ICC charges thrown against Netanyahu. And first of all, what are these people trying to accomplish? I mean, you wrote us, and also I'm gonna reference something you wrote a few days ago about the City University of New York professor. And you were saying, and you just said this too. Their goal is not actually to even ceasefire Israel. Their goal is actually to destroy Western civilization. What do they think they're going to accomplish? This is what's
Yeah,
going on here. Why does
they
them
want to.
go ahead?
Yeah, yeah. So far, the first up, George Clooney, and maybe even Amal Clooney, I don't really know, but George Clooney is Palestinian. One of his ethnicities is Palestinian. He's
Yeah,
obviously somebody
I
who
thought
speaks
she was too, so that's why I thought maybe this was coming
very
from.
well, maybe. I don't want to assume that, but
Right.
he's always been sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. So I mean that comes from just family connection. Um, so that's part of that. But the left wants to dismantle Israel because they want to dismantle Western civilization, and that is one of the outposts of Western civilization. Israel is a Jewish homeland in the midst of a very Eastern region, right? Eastern oriented region, if you will. It's theocratic in nature, based on Islam, which is Judaism and Islam, for that matter, Christianity, all can be described as Eastern religions. They all came from what we would call in the West the East, right?
Right.
This is the Near East, Middle East, Near East. They see Western civilization as illegitimate. They want it deconstructed because it's a conqueror, again, oppressor, oppressed, occupier, occupied sort of mentality. But basically, what they want to do is they want to demolish it so they can recreate it in the image that they like, which is a elitist, autocratic, um, and Marxist structure. That's what they want to do. They have to demolish it in order to rebuild it the way that they want it rebuilt. So
So
it's
I can
it,
I can sit here and I can make an argument. If you're talking about Marxist communist ideology, it's never worked ever.
right,
You
right. It's
know,
never
and
worked.
I have to tell you, and I even have friends who say, well, it's never worked because it's never been done right. I have actually liberal friends this is the constant thing, it's like, we can do it the right way. No, you can't. It's not going to work. It's intrinsically
Well,
flawed.
I got to tell you about a friend of mine, and I mean this is I worked with this guy at the time that the Soviet Union collapsed, right?
Uh-huh.
And he was an avowed communist Marxist, right? And we were all working the graveyard shift together, right?
Yeah.
And he was insisting that communism was working in Russia, and that it was all just the American media was biased against the miracle of the new Soviet man and stuff like this. And then the Berlin Wall fell. And then he changed it to and said, well, they were never real Marxists to begin with.
Right. Of course not. Of course they weren't.
He was rather bitter about it. They weren't really Marxists. Don't tell me that. Hey, what happened to your Marxist parents? They were never Marxists.
I'm just ideology is a fascinating thing because people cling to it. We got the same problem in the scientific community. If you've built your entire career on a theory and then it's proven not to be true, your career is basically dust. So people will hold on to crap just for freaking forever.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, that's more of a human nature problem. I mean, to be
Yeah,
fair, the problem is that people think that scientists are somehow absolved of human nature, which is very much not the case. And so if they bet their whole career on a scientific theory that ends up turning out to be false, yeah, they're going to be resistant to that. And political theorists tend to be the same way. But we sort of expect it from political theorists. We kind of think that scientists should be more interested in
Yeah.
the actual scientific method, and that just because you've proven something to be not correct does not mean you failed in science. It means that science actually worked. You've
Oh,
proven it
yeah,
to be
correct.
not
Right.
successful. So now you can go on to a different hypothesis and see if that explains things better. But there's a lot of money that gets flooded into things. And I think we're talking about the same thing. We're basically talking about
Oh, we're totally
climate
talking
change,
about the
right?
same thing. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of government money that is flowing into that system that is there to support the idea of climate change. And the money is going to the people who say climate change is real, right?
Right.
I mean, and when I'm talking about climate change, climate's always changed. We've got
Yeah.
climate change for billions of years now. I'm talking about anthropogenic climate change, right? Man caused
Right. Correct.
climate change. That's where the money is. And
Right.
if you come out and say, you know what, I've been looking at the data, I've been doing the scientific method, we've looked at the models, and it turns out that the models are incorrect, they're not predictive. So that therefore the working theory of climate change must not be right. Well, your money drives up,
That's correct. Yeah.
and
Right.
you get to go drive a truck for a living for a
Yeah.
while.
Ed, I have to tell you a story myself. So and I've told this story on the air before, but I can't name the details because you'll see
Sure.
why. I'm at
Yeah.
a Christmas party of a very large scientific organization, and I won't can't tell you why I'm there or whatever, but I'm there. And so we're all getting a little drunk, and I'm talking to this guy, and he's a professor of climatology at a major university. He's considered one of the major people in this field. And we're sitting at the bar, literally drinking. And I asked him, I turned to him and said, Professor, tell me about climate change. And he slams his drink down on the bar and he'll say, yeah, I'll tell you about climate change. Climate change is bullshit. And he goes on and on. But the thing, and I'm a little drunk, so I don't remember all the details. But the one thing he does say is he says, you have to understand, in my business, if we don't acknowledge that climate change is real, we don't get any money. That was the first thing he said. Right, so everyone's playing by the rules, Now, and I've had people on the show like Patrick Moore and Mark Morano and stuff like that. I mean, the thing
Yeah.
is, you're absolutely right. The global warming is real. The temperature of the Earth's been going up for 300 years. But like Patrick Moore pointed out, for the first half of those 300 years, there was no industrialization on the planet. It still went up anyway. I
Right.
mean, no, that's bullshit. But you're absolutely, and I think there was something that David Strom wrote on Hot Air today that I wanted to talk to you about. So he made the point that he's talking about, what's the name of that woman, Haley Jones? I can't remember her name is not.
Oh, Nicole Hannah Jones.
No,
Nicole Hannah
Going Howard
Jones.
Jones, right. So, she came out with some ridiculous question about basic economics. And I'm thinking, we have two different standards in this country right now. We have, and I think, was it you or him that wrote about the normies? So people going to
That was
work,
me.
making their living, and trying to invent products, working for 3M or whatever the hell they're doing. And then you have people like her who and also what you're referring to here, people are basically on the grift roll, and they get on the
Yeah.
grift roll by basically interfacing with the government. That you can get really cheap money easy by interfacing with the government in the right way, and I think people are starting to get pissed off.
Well, first off, I have to preface this by saying everything that David Strum writes is wrong. So,
Yeah,
and I hope you tell him that.
I'll tell him that. Yeah, right.
I've known David for over 20 years, so
Yeah,
he'll laugh
he's
at
told
that.
me
But
he's very fond of you. He's told me that.
oh, he's adorable. You can't
Yes, he
not
is.
love David Strum. He's just
That's what I
adorable.
think too. I agree.
He's an absolutely great guy. So that's the reason why I can joke around about stuff like that. We like
Uh-huh.
to kid each other like that. But yeah, the problem is that there's no money that's actually going elsewhere because the government is bigfooting everything. And that's the reason why you need to get government out of that business. Now, we could do that in the United States. You'll never get Europe to stop doing that, though. So the money, the research will just slide over to Europe, where they'll still produce the papers that make the elites look good. But your story doesn't surprise me in the least. The people who are involved in this understand exactly what's going on with this. When it comes to the Nicole Hannah Jones, the Nicole Hannah Jones thing. I mean, people who don't recall Nicole Hannah Jones, she's the one behind the 1619 Project,
Yeah,
which
right.
argued that the United States was actually founded on the basis of slavery, and the Revolution was fought to preserve slavery, which is absurd. It's an absurd reading of history. Um, but you know what? She got a lot of money for it
Yeah, she
because
did.
it what it did was it validated a lot of the elites who want to make ethnic determinism the sole the sole consideration, not just of education, but of every single public policy that you can imagine. That's the that's the DEI, this critical race theory is the underpinning of that. And Nicole Hannah Jones's uh, research and her scholarship was really poor, but it delivered the result that the elites wanted, and that's what's
Right.
happening with climate change. That's what's happening with other aspects of science and academia, is that they are not in the pursuit of knowledge any longer. They are in the pursuit of propaganda that is intended to help strengthen the hold of elites on power.
So you're editor of this publication, hotair.com. What do you tell my friends? Like, I had a friend of mine, and I can't remember who he was. We had an interview. Saw some show somewhere, and we were I think it was David Strom actually was on, and we were talking about the fact that basically the mainstream media can't be believed anymore. And my friend, he's a Republican, but he's a well-educated guy, and he says,
Sure.
is this really true? The New York, he calls me up, the New York Times is printing crap. And I said, yeah. And he said, give me an example. And off the top of my head, I couldn't, because it's like, it's, overabundance of riches, overburden of
Right.
riches. I could not come up with anything on the top of my head. But what do you say to people who like my friend who says, that who doesn't buy he's been reading the New York Times all his life, and he doesn't buy the fact that most of it's bullshit now. What do you say to them?
Well, I have an advantage because we've been archiving all these things that we've been finding. So all I have to do is go over and do a search at Hot Air for New York Times bias, and you will get a plethora of examples of this. I would just say off the top of my head, publishing the fact that the Israeli Defense Forces demolished the hospital, Al Ali Hospital, in the opening days of the war was one piece of crap that the New York Times reported, as well as the Washington Post, CNN, because they couldn't wait for the sun to come up to find out whether the hospital was actually demolished or not. They
Right.
published it before the sun came up, and when the sun came up, the hospital was still there. There was a dent in the parking lot, and the
Right.
windows had been blown out from the shockwave of an explosion. But it turned out to be a Palestinian missile dud that had fallen back into the parking lot and apparently killed a couple of people that were in the parking lot and damaged about 10 or 12 cars. There was a picture of it. The hospital was still standing. They were still using the hospital, but before the sun came up, both the New York Times and the Washington Post reported that hundreds of people had been killed, the hospital had been demolished, and the Israelis intentionally targeted a hospital. And it took the New York Times 6 days to finally admit that that story was not accurate. The Washington Post, I think, but I take that back. I think it was the Washington Post that took 6 days, and the New York Times retracted it substantially the next day. But one or the other, and that's the mainstream media. What they were doing is they were just going off of Hamas's propaganda. Hamas uses. I can't tell you how many times we saw uh, uh, casualty statistics from Gaza in the war that came from the Gaza Public Health Ministry. The Gaza Public
Yeah.
Health Ministry,
Right.
Hamas,
Right.
who started the war with a mass atrocity that killed 1,200 people, mostly civilian men, women, and children, raped a bunch of women, in some cases to death, and kidnapped 200 and something hostages in the opening hours of the war. And these are the people who are being presented as reliable sources, while at the same time they are only reporting what the IDF has to say, saying, "Well, this is an IDF claim." Like,
Well, hold it.
it doesn't take long.
Yeah, and so I'm sitting here in Minneapolis, basically working in my underwear, and no one has to tell me. No one, yeah, like, how stupid do you have to be to trust these people? That's you're working at the New York Times, you're getting paid a really good salary for writing stuff. How stupid do you have to be to even believe it? I don't understand. You know,
It isn't even about being. Not even about believing it. It fit their narrative.
right?
It fit their narrative because the narrative on the radical left, which is what controls academia and the media here, and to a certain extent the bureaucracy, the federal bureaucracy, is that Israel is an occupier and that the Palestinians are occupied. Now, it's true that Israel occupies the West Bank. They have since the 1967 war, and there's a reason for that. It's because the Arabs kept trying to invade Israel and through the West Bank,
Right.
and they finally seized it and took it away from Jordan because they needed it for their own security. They also seized Gaza, but they haven't occupied Gaza since 2005. Ariel Sharon unilaterally withdrew from Gaza, and the Gazans have been in control of the Gaza Strip ever since.
Yeah.
Not the borders, because Israel's border and Egypt's border has been fortified because they don't trust the Gazans. But Gaza wasn't occupied on October 7th or October 6th or any time since 2005. So the idea that Gaza is an occupation is nonsense, or at least it was until they started war, and now Israel is more or less occupying it, although not formally. They're occupying it while they're fighting the war there. But I mean, this is what the problem is. The problem is that you have the elite circles, and this is Martin Gurry was talking a little bit about that in that piece that you mentioned earlier about the revenge of the normies. That's at the Free Press. It was also at Discourse magazine, was where it first appeared. Martin Gurry first published it there. Is that the elite circles here, the governing elite, if you will, in academia and politics, want to impose their version of reality on the world, regardless of whether it's actually true or makes sense, because that's how they're going to operate, and that allows them to control power. Controlling narrative controls power, and so they just use whatever is handy. And if that means they're going to regurgitate Hamas propaganda, then it means that the hospital, the Al Ali hospital, was demolished, whether it was or not.
So, I was talking about the fact that, look at what Israel did with this piece of dusty real estate. And you're talking about the fact that you're right. Israel hasn't been in Hamas or Gaza for like 14, 15 years. And I know the Gazans didn't do anything with it. As a matter of fact, most of the physical infrastructure from in Gaza was put there by the Israelis, And so I get back to this thing about the fact you have one culture that's completely like basically proactively productive, and you have another culture, and their only real existence seems to be to destroy Israel. So what do they think they're going to, are you going to dismantle Tel Aviv? What are you going to do? Are you going to, it's like, I don't, I don't think people are thinking this through. Of course, they're not thinking it through. It's that they're, it's like they're stupid. I don't have any. Do I have a point here? You tell me.
No, I mean I don't think the elites are thinking it through either, because I think that this is one of those instances where um, I hate to use the Nazi analogy. It's just so handy, right?
What
Uh,
analogy? I'm sorry.
the Nazi analogy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm going to validate Godwin's law, in which every political discussion eventually reverts to the Nazis.
That's right.
And I hate doing that, but it is actually handy in this case. And I'm not saying that this is exactly the same thing, but I'm telling you that this is part of the process. Is that one of the reasons why the Nazis were able to come to power in Germany was because there was a lot of chaos. The Weimar government was an utter disaster. The economy of Germany was completely destroyed. Uh, Post World War One, excuse me, and and the elites there thought that they could use the Nazis to basically organize things better, but they would eventually be able to push them out of the way. They would use them to restore certain things about Germany, and then they would eventually push them out of the way because the Nazis were all
So
crazy.
hold it. You're saying that in this scenario, Hitler and his clan is not one of the elites, right?
No, no, they
Yeah,
were. I mean, they were an outside force. I mean, outside inside, but I mean, they
right.
were not part of the they were not part of the governing elite. They were very much a grassroots type of organization, right? But the elites tried to co-opt them and ended up, being first up against the wall. And that's I think the elites are walking into that trap here in terms of the radical left, in terms of embracing movements like Hamas. I mean, you've got this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. You've got people on campus holding up signs that says "Prayers for
Oh
Palestine."
yeah, yes. No, tell me about it. It's the stupidest thing ever.
Stupidest thing ever. And
Yeah,
these are college students, right? These
I
are
know.
grad students. Some of
I
them are
know.
faculty.
I've been laughing about this for weeks. It's like really queers for
Before that,
Palestine. Yeah, you go
yeah,
over there and try that.
go over to Gaza City and try being a queer in Palestine and
That's
see how
right.
that works out for you. You go to Tel Aviv first
Yeah. Oh,
and see
yeah.
how that works
Well,
out for you.
and that's the
And then
irony.
go to
Tel Aviv is one of the most gay-friendly cities on the planet. It's
it's
like,
a liberal democracy.
yes, that's
It's
right.
a liberal
So yeah.
democracy.
So
But
you went through one of these guys, right? Sure.
so, I mean, so to a certain extent, all of these people are just useful idiots. One of the things I was going to talk about, though, was the fact that they're all doing, the prayers, the Muslim prayers, right? They're all kneeling and doing the Muslim prayers and reciting the, I forget what it's called, but it's the verse that by which you declare yourself a Muslim.
Yeah.
And they're trans.
Yeah. I
And
know.
I mean, these people are they don't care about Islam. They're not there for the theology. They're there because they see Islam as a force that they can use to dismantle Western constructs, so that then they can follow up afterwards and take over and rebuild it as they see fit. But the problem is that they're like the Germans who thought the Nazis were just a useful tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to be the first ones that these forces turn on.
What you were talking before about the fact that a lot of this is based on basically like personal character traits, and I think a lot of these kids on campus, I think one of the reasons they're doing this is just to be perfectly blunt, it makes them feel good. That a lot of these kids have
Yeah,
never been challenged. I mean, we live in a time right now where basically, especially if you're the 1/3 of the population is quite affluent, and if you're from an affluent family, you have no real cares or no real problems. You may think you do, but they call first world problems. And these kids literally doing this is giving them basically a dopamine rush. It has nothing
yeah.
to do with the politics of it at all. But they haven't seemed to figure that out. But they're young too. I don't know.
Well, Jim, I think there's a couple things working here, right? One is what you're talking about. Two is, to be a little on the glib side. I think at least some of this is part of the eternal college yearning to get laid. Okay.
Oh yeah. I have hold it before you go on. I have said the entirety 60 Summer of Love thing was just it was a massive plot to get laid. That's all it
Yeah,
was.
I mean, some of these people, there's a minority of these people who are really committed to, deconstructing Western civilization, and a few, not, maybe more than a few of them who actually are Hamas, you know, who actually support Hamas. But I think a lot of the people that show up on the quads and occupy and pitch tents is because they're pitching tents in a completely different context.
Oh my god. All right, now I have to go there because you just went there. So, I mean, I'm not the only person who noticed this. This is very sexist. So, if you want to bail out, that's fine. That the majority of the protesters are females. I mean, it's like, have you noticed this?
That's why the guys are showing. That's why the guys
That's
are
right.
showing.
That's the reason I brought that up. That's the very reason.
It's because that's one of the reasons why the guys are showing up to these things, right?
That's correct. Right.
And and I think that was probably true in the '60s too.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's that aspect of it. However, I think that not to be quite as glib as that, but it's about belonging too. And a lot of these people don't come from families where they feel like there's a sense of community. They come to these
Yeah.
places,
Right.
they're displaced in a certain emotional context because they're someplace away from their communities of origin, and they're looking for community. And to a large extent, these are lost souls. These are
Yeah.
people who are lost souls, and hopefully they can find their way back to reality at some point. But some of them will always be lost souls, and you'll have to deal with with the damage that that does. Just like it did in the 60s and 70s, right? That movement in the 60s and 70s transformed itself into a left-wing, violent, militia movement, right? The Weathermen
Yeah.
were around for another 20 years after that, and then really
Right. That's
active
right.
for another 10 or 12 years after that.
Well, and
They
also
continued to
William
move
Ayers
further and
very
further.
famously said after he became a college professor, he said, "We'll turn your children, give us 40 years and we'll turn your children into Marxists." He basically said that,
Right,
and
and this is the long march through the institutions. So that's what they're accomplishing. So I mean, we can make some. There's very easy to have some laughs along the way, but that's what they're accomplishing. And it's the exact same people, right? It's the
yeah,
Bill Ayerses, it's the Kathy Boudins, and and the Angela Davises that are doing this, and that's not funny at all. That
well,
is very
what do you
carefully
think
what it fits into.
what do you think is going to happen now? Do you think this is going to end up being a violent left wing revolution too? I mean, we got
Eventually,
these,
yeah.
yeah. There's
Alan Dershowitz was talking about that last week. He said, you know, wait for phase two. I mean, it's not going to be anywhere as big, right? I mean, because a lot of the people here are going to grow up a little bit, fall out of this thing, but there's a core of people here who have been radicalized to the point where this is going to be their lifelong mission now.
yeah,
And once they find out that the political system here is not going to play along because the normies are going to take charge again, like they did in the 1970s and 1980s, they're going to become violent about it. It's inevitable.
what do you think is going to happen during the conventions this coming summer?
You know, I think there's going to be violence in these cities, right? I think you're going to see violent demonstrations in Chicago. You probably see them in Milwaukee too, but they're not going to be close to the convention. Um, and I think that these cities are going to be more prepared for that than Chicago was in 1968. I think they're going to have strategies in place. Hey, have you been to a? I mean, very few people actually get to do this on a percentage basis. Have you been to a political convention, a Republican or Democrat convention?
No, I haven't. No, I've been
I've been to
invited
three.
several times. I never went. Oh,
Well, to be honest with you, it's kind of a pain in the butt.
yeah.
You're not missing much. You're not missing much, but I
I
mean, at
didn't
least
think
I've had
so.
the
That's
experience.
that's the reason
I
I
can't
didn't
bring
go, Ed. I didn't think I was missing much.
you really aren't missing a whole lot, except for the experience of it, right? Because it's all pretty much, you know what's going to happen. It's
Yeah.
fun to meet people and do that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not like it's worthless, but you can probably watch it on C-SPAN and you're just fine. But I've been to three. I was in New York in 2004, and that was, just a couple of years after 9/11. Well, almost exactly 3 years after 9/11. I've been to the one in the Twin Cities. 2000. These are all Republican conventions in 2008 because that's where I lived at the time.
Yeah.
And I was in Milwaukee in 2016. Or excuse me, Cleveland, not Milwaukee. I was in Cleveland in 2016, where Republican convention was. And there is a lot of security, and it's spread wide. You have concentric circles of security that
Uh-huh.
you have to be able to get through to go in or out. And they're serious. And it's not the city that provides the security; it's the federal government that provides the security. They use um, law enforcement from the city and the state. They basically,
Go out.
deputize them.
Yeah.
But they'll have National Guard at these places. Those violent demonstrations are not going to get any closer than the demonstration zone that these cities set up for that purpose. So it's not going to have an impact on the conventions itself, and especially in Chicago, I don't think the media is going to be terribly motivated to cover the violence in the streets as a news angle. They might be more motivated in Milwaukee, where Republicans are going to be at, to make them look,
Right.
radical and weird.
Right.
But yeah, I expect that there's going to be some violence, but it's not going to get to the point where not like in 1968, where it actually rolled into the convention and made a complete mess for Democrats in that cycle. I don't expect that at all.
All right. Here's a $64,000 question to end. is Biden going to be replaced on the ticket? I don't see how they could do it at this point, but
No, only if he voluntarily decides he wants to withdraw,
and
because
he
at that
won't,
point,
will
then
he?
it's legit. No,
Will he?
you kidding me?
No.
Biden, well, Jill Biden won't let him. I would imagine. I think that that's really what the issue is here. But you can't go into, neither party can do this. I mean, technically, it can be done. You can open up the ballot on the first ballot. You can release the delegates by rule. You can pass a rule that releases all the delegates on the first ballot, and then they can vote their conscience.
Right.
But both parties have held and are still holding, actually, technically speaking, primaries in which people have actually voted for these two nominees overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
And you know, overwhelmingly for Trump among Republicans, overwhelmingly for Biden among Democrats, although there wasn't really much of a serious challenge to Biden on the Democrat side. If you get to the convention and then say, oh, by the way, your votes don't count anymore, we're going to open this thing up on the first ballot and let the delegates decide what they want, regardless of how you voted in the primaries. I mean, voters are going to have a really legitimate gripe. They're going to be pretty sore about that, even if they may not have thought that Biden was the right guy for this cycle. If they went out and voted for this guy and then found out that their vote was essentially meaningless, they're going to be pretty damn upset about it. So, yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that happening. The idea of having the debate in June is supposedly the trigger for that. To let the Democrat Party say, well, if he falls on his face against Trump in June, we've got time to organize something. You can't do that. Besides which, even if you did, the only option you've got without absolutely fracturing the party all the way down to its core would be Kamala Harris.
That's
And I
right.
don't know anybody who's anxious to have Kamala Harris be at the top of the ticket.
Right. Right. I totally agree with you completely. I want to thank you for your time here. I told you we wouldn't go past 45 minutes, and we're not going to. So, see, I'm a man of my word. Who would
You are a
have
man of your word.
freaking known? And I can't thank you enough. I'll tell David Strom that you hate his guts. So,
Yeah, please do. And then have him come back on and talk bad about me.
yeah. Yeah, right. Thank you so much, sir. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Jim.
Ed Morrissey, the managing editor of hotair.com, very, very knowledgeable man. And he's right. It's just basically a bunch of college kids who want to get laid. It's basically what it is. I'm looking at the playback there. I look terrible. I mean, I don't know if it's because I've been, not under the weather. Or I don't know what the deal is. I think we have to redo the lighting all in this damn studio all over again. Not good. Not good at all. Well, it's part 3 now. So if you want to call me up, got numbers on the screen, 563-999-3435, gemini.com/call. I got 3 things here for part 3. First one's a little scary. So there was a study published in the Toxicological Journal of Sciences. They did a study of human testicles. They couldn't find a single pair of testicles that didn't have a huge number of microplastics in them. That would be tiny, tiny little plastics, little beads of plastics that usually come from like water bottles and stuff. Couldn't find a single person that didn't have these. It's not good. Now, there's a theory going on that these microplastics are actually what's causing the decrease in sperm count worldwide. I don't know if you guys have followed this, but right now, sperm counts are going down and have been for decades all over the world. And no one's ever been able to figure out why. Now they're starting to think it's this. And the other thing, hold on, there's another thing here too. And that is they found these microplastics both at the bottom of the ocean and on Mount Everest. They're freaking everywhere. And they're in your testicles. I just thought you'd want to know that. So if you're having problems, I don't know, maybe you're drinking too much water. This is a part where hydration is not necessarily good. but don't drink it out of a plastic bottle, that's all. Okay, and and so the other thing I got here, which I kind of alluded to before, and that is, um, so OpenAI AI is going to release the new version of ChatGPT. It's called GPT 4.0, if I'm right, or something like that. And so this one's going to be it's kind of going to be kind of an enhanced version of like Alexa, the Amazon Echo thing, and so you can talk to it. And so they decided there's that movie about what 10 years ago called Her, where Scarlett Johansson played the voice of basically an AI robot. It was the type of thing where no physical body, but like Alexa, this thing you could talk to it, and she played the voice. So they asked her if she wanted to do this. They were willing to pay her a substantial sum of money to record the voice or let them model her voice for this new Chat GPT. And she said, after an enormous amount of thinking about it and also personal considerations, who knows what those are? I mean, I suppose there's a possibility if you have kids, and she does have kids, you don't want them growing up thinking, "Oh, that's mom." I don't know. Don't ask me. It's like I'm just a guy yakking on the interweb. It's like so she declined. So they got another voice actress that basically sounds just like her. Now I gotta admit, I've heard the A/B comparisons between the. I do not think, and maybe it's because I'm a musician. I don't know. I don't think those voices were kind of similar, but I don't think they were identical enough so that anybody would actually mix them up. That's my personal feeling, but a lot of people disagree with me, so I don't know what to tell you. And she's now going to sue them because she said, well, she said they were eerily similar. I personally disagree. I don't think they were. They were similar, but not eerily, But the problem is you get any female voice to do that, unless you're talking about somebody, like Brenda Vaccaro, and I don't know if that means anything to anybody. She's an actress from the 1970s, but she had a particularly husky voice, and she was kind of known for that. So, but most women, have a relatively banal, um, feminine voice, and I don't know if they were actually Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he swears that they weren't trying to copy her. They just found another actress and did it. Woman's won't be named. She's anonymous, and they refused to name her. But I don't know. I don't know what to tell you about that. It's like I don't know, some jury's gonna have to decide. It's a lawsuit, but and of course it's a civil lawsuit, so it's not a beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just a preponderance of evidence. But if I was on the jury, I would say no. But I'm also, based on what I know, what's going on discussion online, that I'm in the minority. It appears. So and finally, um, Microsoft announced today, this all just happened today. All three of these things announced today that the new version of Windows will be basically driven by their AI program called Copilot, and that Copilot will keep a snapshot of every single thing you do on your computer. Now, they're saying that this is going to be um, secure because the snapshots actually stay on your computer. In other words, they're not in the cloud. So if somebody, hacks their cloud AI program, they can't get at the information and actually have to actually hack your actual computer. But still, I mean, God, I don't know. Do we need this? You tell. I mean, I have Jeff Shaw on this program regularly, and he's been playing with this AI thing for like years. He has a big subscription at OpenAI, so that sort of thing. And he tells me he's talked to this thing for hours. I'm not interested in doing it. I don't know. Maybe I should doing this. Maybe I should ask him. Am I better looking than Joe Rogan? I think the answer is no. I know that. So yeah, there you go. That's what's going on in the tech world. We're taking tomorrow night off. We're coming back on Thursday. Murray Sabrin's going to be here. He will answer all your economic questions. We are the only. No, we're not the only, but we are the most prosperous capitalist society on the planet, and we don't even teach basic economics in high school. I don't understand. Doesn't Most people don't know shit about money, you know? I mean, this all came up and um, Ed was talking about, what's the woman's name? Hannah Jones, uh, the woman who the 1619 project. This all kind of started because she posted something on Twitter a couple days ago about the fact that somebody said, well, in capitalist system, where you can actually create investment actually creates employment. And she actually wrote back one word, how. And it was kind of based on a previous post. It was obviously that was kind of accusational that she didn't buy it. And she doesn't buy it because she's an idiot. That's all I'll say. I mean, anybody, the guy who posted this actually did post a long screed on how this works, and I've talked about this before, how this works too. Uh, it seems pretty obvious to me. People invest their money, and the investment is used to create products and services. And because you need people to do that, that creates employment. It's pretty, standard issue crap, I think. But she didn't understand, you know. Well, communists, rah rah. I'm Marxist. Yeah, good for you, honey. That's terrific. And yeah, I just insulted you. That's right. I don't actually call women honey in real life. So anyway, so Murray's on Thursday, and he will explain some of the stuff. The primary thing, particular thing I want him to explain is that we have varying different views on what's going on in the underlying economy. A lot of people think that things are completely going to hell, and some people think they aren't at all. I talked to a good friend of mine today. He's in finance, and he thinks it's all just BS. He thinks things are going just fine. So anyway, we're going to talk to Murray about it. That's on Thursday. So yeah, I'm taking tomorrow off. I got a bunch of stuff to do, and I got to not walk. That's my goal for tomorrow. I want to thank you folks for watching. Always, thank you. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie, and good night to you wherever you are. I'll see you on Thursday night. Take care.